Hey, it's Tim from AK Endless Sports Cards. Back in Alaska. It was a long trip back. I had about 19 hours of total travel time, but I am back and have had an opportunity to get a little bit of R&R and yet get out and do some walking at the same time. So, feeling pretty good, getting adjusted back to the time difference. You know, up in Alaska, we're 4 hours behind Eastern Standard Time, so takes a minute when you're on vacation for 29 days to adjust back into your own time zone, but here we are. So this week's video is based on a fun activity to determine what your favorite cards are within your PC. So I heard about this at the National, the idea of creating some sort of like a bracket for some of your favorite cards to see, like, you know, what your favorite cards actually are. I thought it was interesting because I was actually asked during the National, like, what my favorite PC card was. And I really had to think about that. And it was actually a very thought-provoking piece because I'm just like, you know, I can narrow it down, but I don't really know what my favorite card in my PC is. And let's face it, we all need an excuse to go through our cards and kind of reminisce about how we acquired a lot of them and that sort of thing. So I really enjoyed this process. And so here's what I did. So I came up with some rules. And I took this concept of creating a bracket and I just kind of adapted it to my situation. So if you want to do something like this, again, I thought it was fun. I'll tell you how I set mine up, and then we'll kind of go through these brackets. Again, just for fun. I kind of learned a little bit more about my collection. As we get into this, and before we get started, I just wanted to thank everybody that's been watching the channel. And if you haven't already, if you'd consider subscribing. And if you've already subscribed, if you consider telling a friend or friends. Because I'm continuously looking to expand my channel and reach out to more and more collectors. So again, I do appreciate that, and thank you in advance. All right, here are the rules for the bracket, the PC bracket challenge here. There's only 3 of them. So one, I wanted to make sure that I owned each one of these cards for at least a year. I wanted to eliminate all recency bias. You know, it just came back from the National. I was able to acquire a bunch of cards that I really like, but I didn't want those to factor in because of recency bias. So my rule, my self-imposed rule there, number one, was that I've owned it for at least a year. 2, I chose 8 cards. I chose like my top 8 in terms of preference. They're not necessarily my most valuable cards, but they're my 8 favorite cards that I've owned. You can do more if you have a hard time narrowing it down and you wanted to do like 16 or 32 or whatever the case may be, and you want to put cards matched up against each other in like a bracket. That would be just the same type of concept, but I chose 8. I only have one more rule, and that is that I only chose 1 card of each player. So for example, if you got a LeBron card, if you have a large LeBron PC, let's say, and you're doing this challenge, I challenge you to choose just one of them and put them against some of the other cards in your collection. So favorite card of each player, only 1 per. That's it for the rules. And these are flexible. You know, you can adapt this however you want. I just, again, thought this concept was pretty cool, so I thought I'd go ahead and try it. All right, so let's go ahead and start with the left side of the bracket. So again, I went with 8 cards, so I've got 4 on each side. In the top left, the first card that I have on there is a 0304 first edition LeBron James Topps rookie card. I've owned this card now for several years. I bought it raw back in a time when cards were much cheaper. I actually had this graded at the National on basically the on-site grading or in-show grading, however you want to call it. I remember back then it was $50 to get graded. It came back a 9.5. It's been one of my favorite cards in my collection ever since. I'm not the biggest LeBron fan, but I am a big fan of that particular card. It's a lot more scarce than the Topps rookie, and the idea of first edition, you know, altogether just is just something that I've always kind of been interested in, especially when the print runs were much lower. The card that it's matched up with is a 2007 Finest Calvin Johnson Blue X-Fractor, and this is a BGS 9.5 as well. It's interesting to note that many of these cards, a majority of these cards that are in my top 8 are BGS, but it makes sense because, you know, these are cards that I've held for a longer period of time, and back then BGS was kind of the gold standard for grading, at least a lot more so than it is today. A lot of shine to that card. That Calvin Johnson's numbered to 50. Both of these two are really, really solid cards, two of my favorites. But for round one between those two, I went with my Calvin Johnson Blue X-Fractor autograph. So that card advanced to the second round. And in the other matchup, on the left side of the bracket, I have my 2013 Denard Robinson PMG Green. It's numbered to 10. It is the highest graded of these Denard Robinson PMGs. It is graded a PSA 8. It's one of my favorite cards. You know, we had some lean years at Michigan during the Rich Rod days and Brady Hoke days. But Denard Robinson was always somebody that was just incredibly fun to watch. You know, had over 10,000 career yards when you add up all of his totals. Just a great player for the University of Michigan. And I have that card matched up with something that you may not have seen, and that's an 11-12 Panini Past and Present Gamers Jersey Prime, and that's Kevin Garnett. That is a game-worn jersey. It is numbered to 5. Super, super rare. It came out of a past and present box that I paid like $40, $45 for. I couldn't believe it. It's a case hit. I got that graded by BGS. It's got 210 subgrades, but it graded out at a 9.5, and it's a thicker card. It's one of my favorites. Again, it's a prime game-worn jersey. It's a large piece of what looks to be a letter or a number. It's just been one of my all-time favorites, especially because I pulled that card. Ultimately, though, I went with my Denard Robinson PMG in this round because it just kind of takes me back to a time where Michigan football was in a rough place, but yet he was the bright spot that you could still root for and have fun with within these games. And so when I advance past this first round on the left side of the bracket, I've got my Calvin Johnson Blue X-Fractor and my Denard Robinson PMG Green. So when you get to this part of the bracket, it gets really tough. Because, man, I'm very fond of both of these two cards. Ultimately, though, I went with the Denard Robinson PMG Green to advance to the finals on the left-hand side. One of the side notes of why I like this card so much as well is because this card actually came up on eBay shortly before the National a few years ago. And I remember seeing it, and I was at my brother's house, and I wanted to make sure that I was able to secure one of those because I hadn't seen one yet, and pulled the trigger and did end up making the purchase. It wasn't very expensive back then either. I want to say it was like $60 or so. But just so fortunate because they're very, very hard to come by, of course, since they are numbered to 10. All right, so moving on to the right side of the bracket, you'll notice that the brackets that I used, I had mentioned before, if you've been watching some of my videos, that I'm an educator, so I thought pencils were appropriate to be able to make my own brackets. You know, it's an informal thing, it's for fun, but I thought it was pretty appropriate to go ahead and make them that way. Well, the first card on the right-hand side of the bracket is a 16-17 Turkish Airlines Rainbow Luka Doncic. It's essentially like an XRC type of card. I love the story behind these. I told this story in the first video I ever made for YouTube, where basically the dealer had opened e-packs of Upper Deck, and once you received a certain number of Lukas in these e-packs, you could exchange them for a physical copy. And so he had done that. I've owned this card for years. It's one of my favorites. It's got a nice hollow foil type finish. It's not numbered, but it's a relatively scarce Luka card, and they've become a little bit expensive over time as well. But I've always enjoyed that card ever since I got it, and I bought it really early. The card that it's paired up with is a 2009-10 Topps Gold, and that's a Steph Curry number to 2009. This is in a BGS 8. Steph Curry has had, as you know, especially if you're a basketball person, Steph Curry's just had a huge impact on the game of basketball and how it's played. He's been one of my favorite players for all of these years. I was really happy when he was able to get some of the injuries and stuff like that under control that he had early in his career. Loved watching him play all these years. And so for that round, I gave the Steph Topps Gold the edge and advanced it beyond the Luka XRC, despite having really liked both of those cards quite a bit. Moving down to the bottom of this bracket, I've got the 2017 Bowman Chrome Megabox Prospect Refractors of Shohei Ohtani. I've really liked this card. I actually broke some Bowman Megas, even after the price had jumped back then. Back then, Bowman Megaboxes were $14.99. So they were very affordable, quite cheap actually. And there was some controversy with this card, and there was some confusion about this card because at one point people had been saying that he wasn't supposed to be in this issue, and then all of a sudden they dried up and people were saying that the boxes were taken off the shelves, and then they were reintroduced. And so there was a buzz around this card basically from the beginning. I never pulled one, despite the fact that I opened many boxes. I did get some Cody Bellingers, though. I was excited about that at the time, which I still have those too, actually. But I ended up buying this one on the secondary market, and this one has a 10 subgrades, and the rest are 9.5, so I guess that would be a true gem plus. Just really like the background story behind this card. It's been one of my favorites ever since. And I think Ohtani's somebody, the likes of which we really haven't seen in my lifetime, really going back to Babe Ruth. So hopefully he can kind of continue that because he's fun to watch. The card that it's matched up with is a 2018 Panini Select Josh Allen Tricolor Prism. It is numbered to 199. I got this in a trade back in the time during COVID times, right around that time period, where I actually traded a Trae Young. I believe I was an Optic Pink, unnumbered. Pink, I don't remember what they're called. Forgive me, Pink Pulsar? I'm not really sure what they're called. It was not the rare pink version. It was the one that was unnumbered. I traded a PSA 9, one of those, for a raw Josh Allen. I ended up sending this in. I got a PSA 10. And so this was right at the time when Josh Allen really started to take off, so the timing was just amazing. And it's a great color match on that card, and so this has been one of my favorites in the PC ever since I received it, and it was great, just an added bonus that Allen was able to be so successful and continues to be. But after this round, when I'm making a decision on this round, I should say, I give Ohtani the edge. I love the story behind that card. And so in my final two on the right side of the bracket, I've got the Steph Curry Topps Gold and the Shohei Ohtani Megabox Refractor. So this is where it got really hard for me, because how do I pick between these two? I really like both of these cards. I was able to get this Curry before cards had just gone absolutely crazy. The other thing that I really like about this card too is, despite the fact it's a BGS 8, to me that's a plus for this card, because when I look at the back on it, it has the corner and edge chipping that the Golds had from this particular release. It has issues with centering a little bit as well. But this is a card that I would be concerned if I saw a bunch of them in really high grade, because this was very, very common to have this type of chipping, and I'd have some trimming concerns with this card. And again, I don't have any specific concerns about a specific card that's out there. I just feel very comfortable knowing that mine, despite having a lower grade, has not been messed with, has not been altered or tampered with or anything like that, or trimmed. So really pumped about that card. So ultimately, I chose the Steph Curry Topps Gold to advance to the finals. And so now my final two cards are the Denard Robinson PMG Green and the Steph Curry Topps Gold, numbered to 2009. And And despite the fact that I really like these cards a lot, and these are two of my favorite, these are, matter of fact, my top 2 cards in my collection as far as how I feel about them. Ultimately, I gave the edge to the Steph Curry Topps Gold. The thing with Curry is that, thus far in his career, he's been with the same team his entire career. So he's at 14 years with the same team and counting. He's got 4 rings. His style of play and, shooting 3-pointers and, constant excitement is just something that we really hadn't seen in the game of basketball up until that point, as far as how his play impacted the rest of his team and then impacted other teams across the league. And I think that it's just an incredible feat that he's been able to accomplish. Some people really don't like him, just like a lot of people don't like LeBron. I get it, personal preference. But I just think that he has had a huge, huge impact on the game of basketball. And I remember when I acquired that card and how excited I was back at the time. And I've just have grown very fond of that particular card to the point where I believe that that is my favorite card in my collection. And so I thought this was kind of a fun thing to do. Again, when I heard the idea, I was just like, man, I would like to adapt that to my cards. Again, it gave me an excuse to go through all my boxes and kind of reminisce on some of these cards. And so, fun activity if you decide to do it. The rules are pretty simple and you can adapt them however you want. Again, collect however you want. So I just wanted to thank you once again for watching my videos. And I will be coming out with one next Saturday as well. I have some things that are coming inbound as far as through the mail, so I've got some pickups that are coming in. I also have a grading return that's coming in as well, so I'll share those with you guys. I also am thinking about potentially slipping in some talk and walk type of videos as well. Don't know if I'll be able to get to one this week, but I will potentially in the future. One of those pickups is a Pop 1 Ohtani, by the way, so stay tuned for that coming up next week. Hope that everybody has had a great week, and remember that the opportunities for collecting sports cards are endless.